All right, mic check 1, 2. Hello, hello. The doggies are here. They are happy to see you. I hope you're happy to see them. Here comes Hercules. I don't think they want me to record. They want to play. Hey, leave her alone. I'm trying to get it. He's been trying to wrestle in the studio the whole time I've been setting up. Hercules, go get your bone. Get your bone in your ball. Okay, do that. Okay. I'm here to record episode 371, which I've already recorded a couple portions of it. I got a segment that's pretty short on Cole Thomas Allen being indicted on 4 counts. And then I got a long section, it's an hour long, talking about the Virginia State Senator Louise Lucas, who's a really nasty woman, but one of the most powerful Dems in this state, in Virginia, where I live. And the FBI raid on her office and on her businesses is huge news. And you probably heard about it in the segment that I'm splicing into this episode. I take you through as much as we knew on the day of the raid. I recorded that episode or that video that evening and just collected as much as we know. And I present some of my theories on what the bribery and corruption probe that we know is going on there is at the root of those search warrants. What could be the story there? And there's lots and lots of smoke. She could be in trouble for a number of things. The woman is a crooked, swampy politician and just a nasty person. So it couldn't happen to a more nasty person. Well, anyway, I don't want to go on too much about that because I'm sitting down to record this the next day, and I got some updates for you in the SPLC case, a quick update in the Cole Thomas Allen case, again, another update in it. And then we have news just now of Virginia Supreme Court speaking out and striking down redistricting here in Virginia. Yes, it has been a very bad week for Democrats. Check on your Democrat friends. They weren't okay before this happened. They're definitely not okay now. And collect their tears while you also tell them, well, there's a right and wrong way to go about things, and you leftists keep on going about things the wrong way and pretending that it's the right way. So I'm gonna try and go through these cases. For whatever reason, my allergy meds are getting to me today, and I'm just a little bit drowsy. I've had plenty of coffee, but it's like one of those times where no matter how much coffee I have, I don't feel fully awake. So I'm worried my brain's going to blue screen a few times while going through court documents here, but perhaps it'll provide entertainment. So welcome. This is Just Human, episode 371. My link tree has all of my links to where you can follow me, watch, listen, and all the different ways to support. Thank you to everybody who's kept me caffeinated. I certainly need caffeine today. And thank you to everybody who has subscribed over on justhuman.substack.com. I have put subscription money to use and used it to purchase multiple documents this week from Pacer. And I really appreciate being able to do that. Thank you very much. If you want to keep me covering these cases, I got playlists for all the different cases that I cover on Rumble and on YouTube. If you want to keep funding that and you want me to keep doing this, buying me a cup of coffee or a subscription to my Substack is a great way to support that work. Hercules, why are you whining? I'm trying to record. Don't be rude. It's a sunny day outside. We just came in from outside, and I don't think it wasn't enough time outside for him. He wants to go back outside and jump on the trampoline. If you don't know, my dogs do that. My dogs jump on our trampoline. They also lay on it and nap on it. They also attack bumblebees from the trampoline and leap into the air after them, which I try and stop because I like bumblebees. Bees are very important. All bees, including the big, fat, stupid ones, or the honey ones. They're all important. All right. Anyway, I might be in a bit of a mood today. I'm pretty happy because this just happened. I'm still processing this huge win. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna just real quickly update you guys on this. All right, so the rumors of the Virginia blah blah. Let's try this. Let's try it again. Hold up. Let's try this again. Hey, folks, remember this map? This was supposed to be the new map of representation here in Virginia. It got rid of 5 Republican districts and it sliced up the on the episode I covered it. I went into detail a little bit about how it sliced up the DC suburbs right here, took a piece of each DC suburb area and extended it out into the state and created all of these Democrat districts. And then it made one Republican one way out here. This was supposed to be the new district map for the state of Virginia, where I have lived since 2008. And this was going to make it a 10-1 Democrat run state and representation in the country and Congress. And this was the Dem gerrymandering map that they successfully got across in a vote last month on April 21st, I think it was. It passed by just like 3%. And they were very proud of it. It was a huge Dem victory, blah, blah, blah. They poured like $60 to $80 million into this private money. $60 to $80 million in private money poured into the state to try and get this passed. Obama was behind it. Tons of national Dems, Hakeem Jeffries, of course, the Virginia senators were behind it. And then there were the power brokers in this state pushed it. The governor, Spanberger, and others. This was supposed to be a huge crowning achievement. In fact, in that episode that I did covering it, which I don't even remember if it was like 2 podcasts ago, I think 3 podcasts ago, I did it. I think it was 3. Yeah, it was episode 368. So 2 weeks ago, I covered it. And I went through the legislation that was passed once these Democrats got control of the House and Senate here in Virginia. And the first significant thing they passed and got signed by Spanberger was the appropriations bill for the funding and the scheduling of this special election. It was priority number 1 for them. They were going to redraw these maps. But the problem always was that the way they went about it was completely illegal. They violated the Constitution of this state in the process they went through, how they set up this election. And they also violated the statute that governs how the wording is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a very plain wording. It can't lean one way or the other. And the wording of it was definitely unconstitutional as well. So this got thrown out. You may remember this map got thrown out by a judge out here in what would be the 9th district if this had stood out in Tazewell County. And that judge said, no, this thing is not constitutional. He put an injunction on it. It got appealed to the Virginia Supreme Court. And today they threw it out, which means huge loss for Democrats in this state and nationally. And it kicks the map back to this. And I think a very salient point that was made by some commenter online, I don't remember who it was, but a very salient point that one of the commentators I read came across during this when this first happened was that the closeness of the vote shows how well drawn these maps are. The way the vote came out indicated how well drawn the maps were. Like, this was a very 50-50 vote, and the way it broke down was pretty much like this. And this map that was drawn back in 2021, it's only supposed to get drawn every 10 years. 10 years, constitutionally, every 10 years opens the door for these maps to be redrawn. And it was just done a few years ago, but it was done under Republicans. So Dems big mad about that, right? So this is the map that is now going to stand according to the Supreme Court of Virginia. This is the map that we're going to vote under this November. Praise God. Praise the Virginia Supreme Court. Now, in their opinion, they threw out the map, but they also took to task Jay Jones and the Virginia Democrats over how they went about this and how they were warned time and time again that this was the wrong way to go about a constitutional amendment to allow this redrawing of the maps, and that this was clearly wrong. It was clearly illegal, but they went with it anyway. Right off the bat, it was a close decision. It was 4-3. The 3 dissenting justices open with the repudiation of Justice Jackson's view, which was the primary author of this, the author of the majority, view of when the election is. They believe early voting does not count as the election. And that's seriously what they argue here. The minority here, which this was a 4-3 decision, and it's nuts. It's nuts that it's 4-3 decision on this because the violations of the Virginia Constitution are so clear. And in order for them to get to their dissent, they have to argue things like that an election is not an election. Back to in the majority opinion, they write, it is fair to ask whether we have or should have reviewed the constitutionality of the proposed amendment prior to it being presented to the voters. But it is not a question the Commonwealth should ask. Throughout this litigation, the Commonwealth, meaning the state of Virginia, has insisted that we cannot lawfully decide this case prior to the referendum. This is very important when you see the online discussion of this entire saga. In its motion for a stay in this case, the Commonwealth argued that long-standing Virginia precedent was virtually indistinguishable, quote unquote, from this case, and that it clearly held that, quote, courts cannot interfere to stop any of the proceedings while this permanent law is in the process of being made, and only upon the completion of this proceedings, if the validity of the amendment is assailed on the ground that the several provisions of the Constitution have not been complied with, then the courts can pass upon the validity of the amendment. The Commonwealth concluded that the lesson is clear. Courts may not preemptively invalidate a proposed constitutional amendment before it has been passed by the voters. Having successfully insisted, and over the objection of the opposition to it, the claimants is what they're called here, and that would be the Republicans who opposed that and wanted the Virginia Supreme Court to go ahead and stop the gerrymandering vote because it was clearly unconstitutional. Virginia Dems, A.G. Jones and his team successfully convinced the Virginia Supreme Court that no, you guys can't stop a vote from happening. You can't stop a proposed amendment to the Constitution from going forward. You can review it after it's happened, but you can't stop it from happening. Having successfully insisted that we postpone judicial review of the constitutional amendment until after the election process, it might be tempting for the Commonwealth to think that the final vote implicitly stacks the deck in its favor, perhaps enough so that the exercise of any judicial review could be viewed as an ultra vires effort to overturn the will of the people, which is how they're characterizing it, right? If this supposition were true, that the precedent case forbids pre-election challenges, and that the will of the people forbids post-election challenges, then judicial review of allegedly unconstitutional procedures used to adopt a constitutional amendment would not exist in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Okay, so to be clear, what they're saying is you Virginia Dems, were warned this was unconstitutional. And it was brought to us to review it by Republicans. They called you out on it, and a district judge said, this is junk. You can't do this. It was appealed to the Virginia Supreme Court. They went to go take a look at it, and Virginia Dems said, no, you can't. You can't. The courts cannot conduct a judicial review on the proposed constitutional amendment here because it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't been voted on yet. You can't review the constitutionality of the proposal. You can only look at it after the fact. And they successfully convinced the Virginia Supreme Court that the court could not stop and could not opine on the constitutionality of this redistricting until after it had been voted on and was going to go into effect. or not going to affect, depending on how the vote went. But they couldn't stop it, and they couldn't look at it. They couldn't opine on it. They couldn't review it before the vote happened. Now that the votes happened, they're taking a look at it, and they're saying, no, this ain't flying, and they threw it out. So all over online and in media, you're going to see Virginia Dems are going to have they already have, their statements are saying that the Virginia Supreme Court is politicized, that it's overturned the will of the people. The people voted for this. 3 million people approved this. And these judges are wrongfully being activist, and they're overriding the will of the people, and that won't stand. This is a grave injustice. This is a violation of people's civil rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The same people who are saying that now, just months ago, told this same court, you can't look at it then. And now they're saying you can't look at it now. In other words, they're saying to the Virginia Supreme Court, you can never review what we do. And I think that highlights and is instructive about the nature of the left. Ends justify the means, power for power's sake. Right and wrong are not a question of the law or of morality. It's just a question of us having the power to do what we want to do at this moment. Whatever they need to say, whatever position they need to take to advance their ability to seize power and wield it against the people is what they're going to do. They have no shame. No shame. There's no intellectual honesty. There's no morality. There's no principle, except for we win, you lose. It's who they are. And that's why you can't have meaningful discourse with them. One of the greatest tweets ever. It's amazing how much leftist discourse is just them pretending not to understand things, thus making discourse impossible. Pick the subject, and that's pretty much what's going on, right? That's also how you can identify leftist in conservative clothing or libertarian clothing. Okay, so anyway, back to the decision here. I riffed a little bit there. The decision rips the Democrats, throughout the opinion, they rip the Democrats on how they went about this and how they were completely wrong on the merits at issue here. Article 12, Section 1 of the Constitution of Virginia mandates a detailed process governing the lawful adoption of constitutional amendments. These procedural requirements may seem laborious to some, perhaps even painstakingly so, but there's no shortcuts to changing the Constitution in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is what they tried to do. Here's the crux of the problem. There needed to be 2 votes, 2 election cycles, 2 votes separated by an election cycle, sorry. But vote 1 happened while the general election was on. Okay, so the Democrats initially voted on this election and this temporary amendment while the general election was still happening. And then they tried to say the early vote counted as the second election. Therefore, we can have this special election on April 21st to approve the constitutional amendment. That's why they've made this insane argument about what constitutes an election in the dissent of this and what J. Jones' office did. They had to make an insane, just mishy-brained, ridiculous argument about election day or an election, what its definition is. They had to make it something that they could shoehorn in order to fit this requirement, in order to satisfy what the Virginia Constitution prescribes must be done in order to have such a referendum. And it clearly doesn't make any sense. Before evaluating the exegesis of the term election by legal scholars and courts, it is worth observing that the Commonwealth's view of an election, what it means, would be unrecognizable to the average citizen. That's what I mean about a court taking them, this court taking Virginia Dems out to the woodshed. That's what they've done in this opinion. They've taken Virginia Dems and national Dems by extension out to the woodshed. Before evaluating the exegesis of the term election by legal scholars and courts, it is worth observing that the Commonwealth's view would be unrecognizable to the average citizen. That perspective should not be scorned but praised. As we have repeatedly said, quote, the words of the Constitution are to be understood in the sense in which they are popularly employed, unless the context or the very nature of the subject indicates otherwise. And thus, we are guided by the principle that the Constitution was written to be understood by the voters. With that perspective, imagine one of the over 1 million Virginians who had voted in person before Election Day in 2025, walking into the polling place. The voter says to the officer of the election, I am here to vote in the election. And the officer of election responds, we are not conducting an election here. But that's why I'm here, the voter replies. Well, maybe so, but let me explain. The officer of elections insists, you can vote in the election, but we are not conducting an election today. Elections are only conducted on Election Day. Legal scholars and courts would have the same bewildered reaction as the hypothetical average citizen. The definition of election has always broadly denoted the act of choosing. And that would be the definition from the English Language Dictionary of 1755. Most, if not all, law lexicons treat this popular meaning as the technical definition of the word. And then it goes on to cite a number of them. What else could election mean other than the act of choosing or selecting? And yet Virginia Democrats were forced to argue hogwash, a complete fallacy. They were forced to argue a fallacy that the election means whatever they need it to mean in order for this referendum to stand. After a brief detour with hobgoblins and non-chat GPT detected, he says, Ralph Waldo Emerson, etc., the majority ends on a strong note. While the Commonwealth is free by its lights to do the right thing for the right reason, the rule of law requires it be done the right way. Under the Constitution of Virginia, the right way necessitates compliance with the requirements of deliberately lengthy, precise, and balanced procedure. Strict compliance with these mandatory provisions is required in order that all proposed constitutional amendments shall receive deliberate consideration and careful scrutiny that they deserve, quote unquote, from the governing case on this matter. In this case in particular, right? In this case specifically, before the court, the Commonwealth submitted a proposed constitutional amendment to Virginia voters in an unprecedented manner that violated the intervening election requirement in Article 12, Section 1 of the Constitution of Virginia. This violation irreparably undermines the integrity of the resulting referendum vote and renders it null and void. For this reason, the congressional district maps issued by this court in 2021, pursuant to Article 2, Section 6A of the Constitution of Virginia, remain the governing maps for the upcoming 2026 congressional elections. What a huge win. This is a huge win for Virginians, for the Virginia Constitution, for the rule of law. This is a huge win for for democracy and for our representative government. However you want to conjugate democracy, republic, Commonwealth, it's a win for however you conjugate it, okay? Because the will of the people was, the law of Virginia was violated here, and then the people's ability to understand what they were voting on was also violated. And they don't I don't think they mentioned this in their opinion, and it wasn't really pushed, but this wasn't only an unconstitutional effort because of it not meeting the requirement for two votes and an election happening in between. It was also unconstitutional because the language, and I went over this in the previous segment I did on this topic, the language they used was, I don't even know what the word for it is. The language they used for it was just was manipulative. The Constitution here requires that it must be plain language. You have to use plain language in the constitutional amendment, and they did not do that. Where is it? Here it is. This was the question that was presented to us here. Question: should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? That is not plain English as the statute requires. You can't say fairness. You can't put in loaded language like that on the amendment, on the question. So, but that wasn't how they overturned it. That wasn't the basis on which they did anyway. All right. I want to show you, or I want to make another point here. Yeah, this account, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name. Just to be clear, the Virginia Supreme Court found that the Virginia Democrat Party, with the boosting of nearly every national level Democratic Party figure, acted illegally and unconstitutionally in an attempt to manipulate an upcoming election, despite being repeatedly warned that they were doing so throughout the entire process. This is a huge loss. I just said a while ago, this is a huge win for voters in this state, regardless of party. It's a huge win for voters in this state. It's a huge win for the Constitution of Virginia, the rule of law. It's a win for the entire country. It's also a huge loss for national Democrats like Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, and others who poured money into this state, cut commercials to try and persuade people to vote yes on the referendum. It's a huge loss for Spanberger, who actually, the rumors are, the scuttlebutt, whatever. The word is that Spanberger's team was not fully on board with this redistricting thing. They thought it went too far and that it wasn't being gone about the right way. They liked the idea of it, but they didn't like the idea of tying Spanberger's legacy to it. But they were forced to go along with it anyway because Virginia Dems, in particular, Louise Lucas, who just had the FBI knock on all of her businesses and offices yesterday or a couple days ago. Louise Lucas was one of the prime people who pushed this. And it's been a source of contention between Spanberger and Virginia Democrats and Democrat leadership in the assembly, because Spanberger was not fully on board with this, but went along, and now she's taken the blame for it. Huge loss for Virginia Democrats. The fallout from it is hopefully going to be more Democrat infighting in the state and less Democrat bills getting passed, less legislation. I pointed this out a while back. I don't remember what episode it was, but I remember I was talking about Spanberger, and I was talking about how she's the Wicked Witch of the East, and she is 100% eyeing the White House. Which means at some point, she is going to begin pivoting to the middle, because she doesn't want to be easily characterized by Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance or whoever the Republicans run. Hopefully it's Marco Rubio. I really don't think there's any other choice than Marco Rubio. He's far and away the best choice. I think he could be an even better president than Trump, to be quite honest with you guys. I think he could be a better president than even Trump has been. Spanberger is going to want to moderate to help her appeal. And they always do this. So I think, or at least the smart ones always do. So I think that this could be a moment where Spanberger begins that turn. So happy day. Instead of this being the map in Virginia, we're going back to this map, which, yeah. Man, good. What a good Friday. Okay, let me close all that out. And I have other topics I want to get to. Hey, folks, the FBI has been very busy here in Virginia today as it carries out criminal search warrants at least 10 properties that are connected to a corruption and bribery probe that's connected to one of the most powerful Democrats in this state, State Senator Louise Lucas, who is, like I said, one of the most powerful senators in this state and someone who is very loud on X and has been a thorn in the side of both Republicans and other Democrats in the state, including Governor Spanberger. Lucas was one of the key people who has pushed for something I agree with, which is cannabis legalization, but in decriminalization, right? Both medically and recreationally. But she's also someone who has profited, sometimes illicitly, from that effort, in that she owns cannabis outlets, and one of those was raided today. She's also someone who pushed very hard for the redistricting effort that many are expecting the Virginia Supreme Court to overrule and cancel out. It's going to be a huge failure for Democrats. And she has not, even though the Fox News article characterizes her as an ally of Spanberger, here in the state, we don't really view her that way. She's somebody who has enemies on both sides, and because she's very difficult to get along with, very headstrong, and she has quite the mouth on her, both when it comes to posting on social media and engaging on the camera and in the Senate. So I don't think you're going to see very many Democrats coming to her defense as she comes under the FBI scrutiny. Now, I've been following this story all day. I'm very excited about it, of course, because it's one, politics, it's two, it's FBI raids, public corruption type stuff. It's happening here in Virginia where I live, and it's happening to someone who is, more often than not, I'm politically opposed to. And whether or not I politically agree with her or not, there's enough baggage here with her. There's enough smoke. There's enough stench of the swamp to make me think she's one of the more crooked politicians in this state. So whether I agree with her or not on anything, I always like to see the long arm of justice come in and hold people to account. And I do think that's what's happening here. And so I've been following this story and I've been digging around into it. Bill Malugin was one of the first to post about it. He posted about 10:50 a.m. Fox was on this story early this morning. And that's really been what legacy media has focused on all day, is that somehow Fox News knew this was happening. I don't think that's what happened. I think that Fox News became aware shortly after the raids were being conducted that, hey, something's going down in Portsmouth, Newport News. Y'all need to get over here. Or no, not Newport News, Norfolk. Y'all need to get over here and watch this, right? Get cameras on scene. And they did. So they had cameras on scene for several hours in this area of Portsmouth. This man right here in the blue shirt was arrested. There were 3 arrests that happened on location here. And this location is a bit interesting. So I watched a lot of this feed. This is one of the other individuals who was taken into custody. I didn't see if he was taken off. Some of these people, this man was later cuffed, and he's in like the plastic restraints right now. He was arrested. So I think I just showed you the 3 individuals who were arrested. I haven't seen charges for them yet. Senator Lucas did show up at one point. There she is. And she talked to the FBI. And then she waited in her car for a little while and left. She didn't give any comment to media, really nothing of substance anyway. Her daughter showed up and made sure everyone knew that it had nothing to do with the medical businesses that the family also owns, in addition to the cannabis dispensary they own and the offices they own. I'm going to get into that more in here in just a minute. I found it interesting that she was very quick to tell media it had nothing to do with her medical business. I thought that was interesting. So, all right, let's get into this. So they broke the story that this place has been raided. As I said, it is against properties that are owned by the Virginia Senate President pro tempore Louise Lucas, a Democrat and close ally. I disagree with that characterization of Virginia Governor Spanberger. Federal law enforcement sources tell Fox News this is in connection with a major corruption probe, and the FBI is serving multiple search warrants approved by a federal judge at her office and a next-door cannabis dispensary. More to come with Alexa Hogan. Earlier this year, Lucas suggested that Virginia Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner were C words, and she pushed for the 10-1 Virginia Dem redistricting plan. Here she is right here. Here are some of the images from it, and then here's the live segment. Now, I'm going to play this for you because in this 1 minute, 28 second clip, Alex Hogan, right here, who is typically the foreign correspondent for Fox News, but my understanding is she's recently moved to Washington, D.C. By the way, the reason I'm aware of that is because other media were criticizing her, that that Fox just happened to have their London correspondent on scene, and then she corrected them to say, well, actually, I just got reassigned to Washington, D.C. Anyway, that's what the legacy media has focused on, is that Fox News got the drop on this. They're very mad about that and quick to accuse Fox News for somehow getting tipped off. Of course, they were perfectly fine with being tipped off about FBI raids against people that they politically oppose. So it cuts both ways, right? All right, let's listen to what she has to say about the raid, and also I'll play some of the video for you. Is it going to show? No, I can't make it bigger for you guys, I don't think. This will be good enough. I'll just zoom in right here there we go.
The FBI here telling us today that these are court-authorized criminal search warrants that they are issuing, and they're going into the building behind me. This is the office here in Portsmouth of State Senator Louise Lucas. You can likely see some of the FBI agents behind me. All of the staffers inside this building were told to come outside. I could hear them saying that they were not allowed back in the building. Throughout the last hour, we've been seeing the FBI come and go carrying boxes out of the building. Now, just across the parking lot next to where I am, there is a cannabis dispensary. We know that the state senator is associated with several cannabis locations and dispensaries. And what we're seeing there, a completely different scene carrying out. SWAT teams arrived with their weapons drawn, telling anyone in the building to come out of the building with their hands up. We also saw at least 3 people being taken into custody. First, they were put in handcuffs, put on the ground, and then they were taken away. So it's a slightly less large presence than we did see earlier, but there still is a good amount of FBI agents still here on the ground. Also, what happened within the last hour, the Senator Louise Lucas arrived here herself. I was able to speak with her. I asked her what her reaction was to all of this. She told me she had no idea what they were doing here. I asked her about the different locations that they might be. She, in response, asked me what locations the FBI were at today. We know, according to officials, at least 10 locations are being looked at today.
10 locations. Now, digging into this, and I'm kind of going to bounce around a bit. But first, you need to know this lady has been in power for a long time. She assumed office in 1992. And she's at the peak of her power in Virginia right now. And I think we've seen the peak of it. It looks like it's going to be downhill from here. She is, in addition to being senator, she is president/CEO of a company called Lucas Lodge, Lucas Transportation, Portsmouth Day Support Program, and Southside Direct Care Provider Organizations. All of those organizations operate at the Lucas Professional Center located in Portsmouth. That is the building that they're raided. This building behind Alex right here, behind this reporter, that building right there where you see the FBI truck right there, that is the Lucas professional building where all of those businesses have offices. It's also where Lucas herself has a Senate office in addition to her office actually in Richmond. Now, something that you heard about the cannabis dispensary. The cannabis dispensary is located directly behind this office. Right? Where'd it go? There we go. See, there's Lucas's office right there, Senator Louise Lucas. If you look at this from Google Maps, it just has her name and it calls it a state government office. That's her right there. Where Alex is, right here, where she's reporting from is right here on the street where these trees are. She's right there under those trees looking across at this building. That's the building you're seeing, right? The face of right there. And right here is the cannabis outlet. That's the other facility that was raided, and that's where those 3 individuals were arrested. So the FBI simultaneously executed search warrants at this cannabis outlet business and at Senator Lucas's office right here. And then within this office building are all those other businesses that she owns: Lucas Lodge, Lucas Transportation, Portsmouth Day Support Program, and Southside Direct Care Provider Organizations. Now, all of those businesses, all 4, are healthcare, medical transport, activity programs and support programs for people with disabilities. Some of them are aimed at, like Lucas Lodge is aimed at people, I believe, aimed at people with a below 70 IQ. And so all of these businesses receive Medicare funding. And remember, she's under investigation for a corruption and bribery allegations. And that's the nature of the probe. And there's at least 10 locations that are being raided. One question I have is that, and I don't know what any other locations are that were raided, but one question I have is there might be a search warrant that is just for this address and this address, or there might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 search warrants just for this building, but 5 different offices within this building, and then 1 for here. So that's 6. That's 6 search warrants, right? Where are the other 4 happening at? Don't know. Haven't seen any reporting of the other places that are being raided. There was an address when I looked up all these businesses. One of them was previously addressed over here, just off High Street. It doesn't really matter, but it was somewhere just down the street, right over here, maybe right here at these buildings off King Street. And then there was another one that is a lawyer's office that's down here, where it says Family Care Service. It's in this neighborhood somewhere off of Crawford, I believe. There was a registered agent who had an office building over here that was connected to her, one of those support services. So maybe they were also raided. I don't know. I haven't seen any reporting of that. I'm just telling you those are addresses that I found that are connected to these businesses she owns and that we know some of their offices were raided. Now, in addition to owning that cannabis outlet, like I said, she owns these other ones. And that catches my eye because those are healthcare and disability assistant businesses, which means they get money from state and federal government programs, right? And thinking back to what we've seen happen in Minnesota, the fraud in Minnesota for the Leering Center and the different child daycare centers, where one of these is an adult daycare program. And what were they doing? They weren't in Minnesota. They weren't really taking care of anybody, but they were getting these grants and they were getting paychecks for services they weren't actually providing at those places, right? And it was all fraudulent. And it made me wonder, I wonder if it's that kind of a thing. It's that kind of corruption, right? Don't know that it is. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility. Lucas Lodge in particular is a concern. And even if it's not under investigation right now, there's enough smoke, there's enough indicators here that this business needs to be looked at very seriously by an outside investigator. And I'm going to tell you why it needs to be outside. Lucas Lodge in particular has a history of serious incidents, including deaths, serious injuries to patients, and deaths. And we're talking about people that are below 70 IQ. We're talking about disabled people. And this business has been looked at over the past 5 years multiple times by the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, who oversee these types of programs. Those inspections and those reviews by the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services have resulted in multiple corrective action plans, CAP, meaning they found something that needed to be corrected after they took a look at it. And if you look right here, I took a screenshot. You can go on the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services website. You can simply type in Lucas Lodge and hit search, and you'll get the same pages that I got. And from 2021 through 2025, you have 7 different investigations that all resulted in some sort of corrective action plan. 2 of those were death or serious incidents. And then for another facility, I think it's a different facility. So there's this one, it says DD Center Based Day Support Services. And then this one says DD Residential Group Home Services for Adults. These are both under Lucas Lodge LLC, and both are owned, and she's the contact for Louise Lucas, the senator. She's the contact person for both of these businesses. This other one had even more since 2021. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inspections by the Virginia Department that's responsible for this. And they all resulted in some sort of corrective action plan. And look how many of them were death or serious incident, human rights inspection, unannounced inspections. This is pretty concerning. And I looked at this account, Virginians for Safe Communities, which I'm not really familiar with. I've followed them. I liked a lot of their posting, but I'm just going to tell you, I don't know them very well or anything. But they are the ones who raised this, like, hey, there have been, since 2019, Lucas Lodge LLC has had 9 deaths and 143 incidents with injuries. And this is all information you can look up on the Virginia website, because this stuff it's public access. And there's an article by this blog called Bacon's Rebellion, which I relied on for some of this initial research I was doing. And they have a pretty thorough segment breaking down the codes at issue here and what's gone on with Lucas Lodge since it became a business. And it's primarily funded by Medicaid since 2005. It provides residential transportation and day support services to individuals with intellectual disabilities in the city of Portsmouth. Lucas is the CEO and president of it. And they have reports on these incidents. There have been 44 incidents in past 5 years of provider noncompliance in the domain of safety and freedom from harm, 112 citations that were repeated from previous inspections, thus meaning they're not compliant. And remember all those inspections I just showed you, this means that they were inspected, they were given that plan, corrective action plan, they didn't do it, they didn't follow through on it. 69 citations for provider noncompliance related to serious incidents, and 171 related to risk and quality. That's all within 5 years. All within 5 years. You can look up each one of these on the website. Now, you may wonder, how can a business that has 143 serious incidents since 2019 and 9 deaths, multiple injuries, repeat violations, failure to comply, how can that business continue operating? Why hasn't the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Development Services shut it down? Well, it might be, just might be, because in her role as a state senator, one of the most powerful in the state, Lucas serves on the Education and Health Committee, which oversees the Behavioral Health and Development Services. So the company inspecting her, the organization, the board, the department that inspects and advises corrective action to the senator's business is also overseen by the same person, by the senator. She also is as part of that committee, her role in that committee oversees the department's medical assistance services and the Virginia Department of Health. And she draws funding from the Virginia Department of Health, I would guess, but she definitely gets funding from Medicaid. And then, of course, licensing and all the inspection happens through these entities, which she oversees. So maybe that's why she hasn't been shut down. So it makes me wonder if the FBI raid is related to either a fraudulent setup, similar to what has been uncovered in Minnesota. So that's like my hypothesis one, possibility number one, or A. That's possibility A. Possibility B is an investigation by HHS OIG or similar, where they've stepped in and said, hey, this is corrupt because the person that owns this business is also on the board that or the committee that oversees the department that does the inspections. Seems a bit swampy to me. So those are my two initial speculations, hypotheses, or possibilities of what could be going on here with these FBI raids. But wait, there's more. So I was watching the feed, was watching here, and was listening to comments that were made by Alex and by her producer. And occasionally they'd interview somebody. They were talking back and forth about what the FBI was doing. They were going live at various times to talk. Fox News, and look right there. You see those vans? There's some vans. There's a van right there. Looks like there's also a motorhome back there. Looks like a motorhome. That's over where the cannabis facility is. And then there's another shot here. Look, van. And I started to think, okay, that Lucas transport business, Lucas Transportation, I bet that's for transporting these people with disabilities in support of Lucas Lodge and the day program and Southside Direct Care. I bet that's what those vans are all tied to. That's why they're in that lot. And then I started watching as they were interviewing this man. And initially these three individuals are taken into custody. They had the plastic cuffs on. And then I think they're about to do right here. They cut the plastic cuffs off and they put actual handcuffs on because these people were arrested. I don't know about that skinnier man. I think that's him right there. Yeah, that's him right there. I'm guessing he's the other guy who was arrested, but I never saw them switch him out from plastic cuffs to actual handcuffs. See, there's more of the vans right there. 1, 2, and then there's, I think that's the daughter of the senator right there in the gray. She's going to be interviewed later. So the FBI was coming in and out of here, and they were bringing boxes in at various times. Some of them were really big, and they looked like they weren't like just regular cube boxes. There were some that looked like, okay, that's like a specialty box, like the kind you would put a TV in, or a rifle or shotgun in. Like it was long and kind of and flat. But it was obviously empty as they carried it in there. I thought that was interesting. They watched this for a while, did a final report and left. I don't know that it ever showed them bringing the boxes back out, but they were there for hours and hours and hours. There's the vote yes on the, there's more of another van showed up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 of those vans. Just something I'm noticing. All right, back to the thread. Wait, where'd my thread go? Here it is.
The FBI here telling us.
No, I already played that for you. There it is. All right, so those are the locations. At least 10 locations. In fact, if you look here, look at all the vans in the picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vans right there. Just saying, they got some. There's more over there on that side too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's like 11 vans would appear from this satellite image. There's a lot of people partaking in this program, which means there's a lot of Medicare money flowing in. At least 10 locations being looked at. Lucas Lodge is headquartered at the same offices, and it looks like all the other ones are too. I went to their website and look. Lucas Lodge right here, residential services, day support services, transportation services. So they're all being looked at. Lucas's daughter, Lisa, arrived at the office and told the news station 10 on your side that she did not know why there was an FBI presence. However, she did confirm it was not related to healthcare. Nothing to do with healthcare. I don't know. They're here to search everything, which is a contradictory statement. She immediately says it has nothing to do with healthcare, but then says they're searching everything, and that she also doesn't know why they're there. Well, if you don't know why they're there, then how can you say it definitely has nothing to do with healthcare? So that's a red flag to me. That's like I didn't take any of the cookies out of the cookie jar, but definitely don't go in my room and look for an empty plate. Like, I didn't take it, but also don't check my pockets. You don't need to check my pockets. New York Times came in later this afternoon, middle of the afternoon, and they spoke to some people who said they were familiar with the case. And those people said the search was related to an investigation opened during the Biden administration. Lock that in, because Democrats, legacy media that are going to come to the defense of this woman are going to say it's Kash Patel and the no good, very bad Trump DOJ going after opponents, blah, blah, blah. No. This investigation was opened during the Biden administration. So we can grab onto that, guys, if we're thinking about strategically how we can communicate the narrative of this investigation. We can grab onto it and be like, hey, this is a Biden DOJ investigation, a Biden FBI investigation that continued into the Trump investigation, and the Trump admin is just seeing it through because there's real probable cause here to believe crimes were committed. That's why a judge authorized the search warrants. It's another reason why I like this kind of stuff, because ultimately a judge has to look at it. There has to be probable cause. The justice system gets involved, and yeah, it makes mistakes sometimes, but overall tends to do a pretty stellar job of getting bad guys. So these two people that are supposedly familiar with it said the search was related to an investigation opened during the Biden administration that has continued, examining possible corruption and bribery related to marijuana dispensary business. FBI agents executed a search warrant at her office and at the neighboring dispensary, according to people familiar with the matter, speaking on condition of anonymity to describe an open investigation. Other locations were also searched, the people said, but we don't know exactly what those are yet. Now, remember, these places are right there next to each other, right? I just lost it again. And where'd it go? There. Remember, these places are right next to each other. So it can be true they're looking at the marijuana dispensary that she co-owns, but they also spent a whole lot of time in her office building where all of her other businesses are. So it could only be in connection with the marijuana business. And I'm going to talk more about things going on with her marijuana business. But I'm not ready to rule out it having something to do with all those other businesses that she owns, because they're all right there. Oh, there's another van, 12 vans. Okay, that's the last time I'll mention the vans. Now, here's where I really perked up interest, and I got a third hypothesis. Nova Campaigns, which is a good account to follow on X for Virginia issues, has a thread from way back on October 30th of 2025. where they were highlighting how Senator Louise Lucas and her pot shop, which is next to her office and her Lucas Lodge Biz, obtained a grant under the infrastructure bill passed under Biden for revitalization of underutilized and vacant lots on the same street. Although it's not vacant and it's not underutilized, she opened her business and office there in 2021. July of 2021, she opened her cannabis outlet. But she went to the federal government under Biden's infrastructure bill and said, hey, here on High Street, yeah, it's pretty funny. She has a cannabis outlet that's address is on High Street in Portsmouth. Pretty clever. Props for that. That's good. That's good business planning. She went and she got this grant under the Biden infrastructure bill to get a bunch of money poured into the revitalization of this area where she just happened to have a business. Louise Lucas, this is from Nova Campaign's thread. Louise Lucas cannabis outlet store and parking lot continued to be highlighted as a possible investment zone for auto stores, even a regional transportation hub, which imagine that would be very lucrative, wouldn't it? You know, quote, this has a lot of potential to redevelop as a number of uses, including an auto-oriented service or commercial uses that could utilize the existing parking lot and amenities, or as a high-density multifamily development. Due to its proximity to existing multifamily developments, it could serve as a transitional use for the Westbury neighborhood to the more intense commercial uses along High Street and anchor an important corner in the district. Got this whole development plan for it. So when's this project supposed to be completed? Well, the end of 2029. Maybe Portsmouth remains in poverty because its leaders are inept and you can't build anywhere, so why invest? But construction is supposed to start in early 2027, estimated to take 30 months, and the project is supposed to close out in 2029. And of course, this would put a lot of money in her pocket because she owns these properties. And so either she's going to sell them to other businesses or she's going to use that money to enhance the businesses she already owns there, right? At the presser for it, Lucas never mentioned that her businesses are a direct benefactor of the project. You can find the complete High Street Innovative Corridor Project briefing document right here. And of course, it doesn't feature any information about her profiting off of that. So, perhaps the criminal probe is in connection with the infrastructure bill that allocated money for the development of that area, including those businesses she owns, which would include the marijuana dispensary, which the Times sources say this corruption and bribery probe is related to the marijuana dispensary business. That would make sense. But there are other possibilities. The registered agent, now this is, let me jump over here. So, if you go to the FBI Norfolk, they call it Norfolk, not Norfolk. Call it Norfolk. There are also other pronunciations that may or may not be appropriate for YouTube. FBI Norfolk on April 29th posted this advisory that, hey, April 2026 fraud investigation results. Listed out indictments or indicted people and sentenced people, please. That first one, Carlton Randall Upton Jr., indicted. 3 felony counts of wire fraud. Well, pretty interesting, given today's news. The Upton indictment appears to be in relation to the Hampton Roads cannabis stores the FBI is going after today. Per court records, this is a Richmond News reporter, Graham Mumaw. Interesting name. Per court records, the charges are related to questionable pandemic loans. One of those was for the Virginia Freedom Life LLC. That's the legal entity that owns the cannabis outlet, which the FBI raided today. I just happened to do that. I didn't mean to do that, but whatever. Cannabis outlet right there. There it is. Cannabis outlet. Yeah, so Randall Carlton Jr., CJ Upton, he's also known by, what did I just do over here? Oops, sorry. I don't know how long ago I did that. I don't know how long ago I changed screens. Pretty sure I showed you this. Oh, that was a pro move, wasn't it? All right. So this story in 2021 about that business, remember it opened in July 2025, calls him CJ Upton. He's the co-owner of that cannabis outlet with Senator Lucas. He's the business partner. And he was indicted on 3 counts of wire fraud. So I went and looked it up. 3 counts of wire fraud related to 6 applications for loans under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and the SBA Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, COVID-19 loan programs in 2020 between, well, actually, let me just grab the indictment right here. United States v. Upton. This was filed April 22nd. His arrest warrant was issued on April 23rd. 3 counts of wire fraud. And let me grab the document for it is the kind that won't be, I had to pay for it. And you'll always have to pay for it because it has attachments and court listener. You can't pull those attachments up. You have to buy them and then download it. Here it is. Anyway, thank you guys for supporting the show and for visiting my links. Subscribing on justhuman.substack.com, Benson Honey Farm, bootleg products, Manly cans, and Ko-Fi. Thank you for all the coffee money. It has kept my coffee cup filled, and it has allowed me to purchase documents such as this one. Indictment, general allegations, abuse of the small business loan, and in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, there was an expansion of disaster-related programs, such as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and the PPP loan program. And, well, Carlton Randall Upton Jr., CJ Upton, the business partner, co-owner of cannabis outlets with Senator pro tempore Democrat Louise Lucas, electronically applied for these loans 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. From at least April 2020 to September 2020 in the Eastern District of Virginia and elsewhere, Upton, the defendant, devised and intended to devise a scheme and artifice to defraud and to obtain money by means of materially false and fraudulent pretenses, representations, promises, and omissions. It was part of the scheme and artifice that the defendant, who is, again, the business partner, co-owner of the cannabis store with Virginia Senate President pro tempore Louise Lucas, her partner, came up with a scheme and artifice and sought to fraudulently obtain disaster-related benefits in the form of SBA-sponsored loans. It was further part of the scheme and artifice that the defendant submitted applications for those loans, 6 of them, to the program that contained false statements, misrepresentations, and omissions about his income, and claimed the business entities and his prior criminal record. False information on his criminal record as well, and the entities he co-owned with the state senator. It was further part of the scheme and artifice that the defendant falsely attested on the aforementioned loan applications that the information presented was true and accurate. And it was further part of the scheme and artifice that the defendant received and obtained over $100,000 in loans. It was further part of the scheme and artifice that the defendant caused the transmission of information and funds by wire between the EDVA and the Commonwealth to DC. And then, he's going to face some forfeiture for that. Here are the wire transmissions that were false on those dates. And of course, a year later, he opened that cannabis business with her. And you see that these businesses, one of them, the entity is Virginia Freedom Life. Another one is Virginia Coastal Properties. Another one is Virginia Coastal Builders. Well, those are all connected to the senator. You think she doesn't know about that? You think she doesn't know about what he did to get those loans? I'd be surprised if she doesn't know a little bit about it, right? And what you want to bet those entities, Virginia Coastal Builders, Virginia Coastal Properties, and Virginia Freedom Life, do you think that it's only this cannabis outlet that they connect to? Or do you think that maybe the reason this building was such a focus is that they're also connected to all these other business entities that Lucas owns? Seems like a pretty strong possibility, right? And when I think about this thing right here, the High Street Innovation Corridor project, which this woman miraculously just happened to be a huge benefactor of because her businesses are located in the same area where all that money from the federal government is supposed to go to enhance that area. You know, that seems like corruption to me. Where's the bribe come in, though? It says it's a bribery and corruption probe. I wonder where the bribe comes into all of that. So that's some of what I found so far in this. And we haven't seen a filing. We haven't seen her indicted. There's no charges against her yet, but seems like a strong possibility there will be. I looked up, let me find some of the other things I looked up and show you guys real quick. So shout out to Graham here. Good job. Actually, great job. Great job connecting that indictment to the senator and that business. His attorney, let's see if does he have attorney yet? Doesn't say yet. Let me see if it's updated. Nope. So has he been arrested? Arrest warrant issued and delivered to U.S. Marshals on April 23rd, but there's no other filings here. There's a motion to transfer by USA to order. Motion is to Carl Upton. Is he already in custody somewhere? All right, I'm going to keep an eye on that to see what comes of it. Now, I want to show you a couple more things to show you. Some of it's just kind of fun, right? Let's just have a little fun. So people have had a great time looking up Louise's previous post, because she liked to dunk on her political opponents, including Donald Trump. And back on August 8th, 2022, when the Mar-a-Lago raid occurred, she posted this point of view, Donald Trump today, looking at an FBI agent. Of course, some of you know my theories about all that, so you know that this actually doesn't land very well with me, but it sure lands right here. It lands today with point of view Louise Lucas today, because this is what we saw happen. In fact, on this live feed, there were quite a few female FBI agents participating in this operation. And there they are talking to either members of the family or people who work there. That's her daughter right there, who's looking at a document. She's going through pages of that document there that she was handed by an FBI agent. Here's one of the boxes they're bringing over. I can't tell what's in it, but it reminds me of there was one other thing I need to bring up about the cannabis dispensary. I didn't bookmark it, but the cannabis dispensary came under scrutiny a couple years ago because they were, before cannabis was legal here in the state, they were selling some products there that were not legal. In fact, 66 products were taken from that outlet, from the dispensary, and were tested at one of the local universities, and they were 65 out of 66 were found to contain illegal levels of THC and illegal cannabinoids. So for a long time, Delta 9 wasn't legal here, but Delta 8 was, and Delta 10 and 11 and all the other synthetic ones and whatnot. And this cannabis, so in other words, the cannabis dispensary was selling illegal products, and no repercussions for it occurred. So there was, there's a possibility here that this is related to her selling a bunch of cannabis products through that store and profiting quite a lot of money while selling them before they were legal in the state. This could be in connection with that, but I think it's more than that. I think crimes with marijuana from years ago from that dispensary would not bring about this big of a FBI response. I don't think it would. I think this is a lot more than that. And we know that it is at least in a way connected to PPP loan fraud and the wire charges against her business partner. And, that may be what she's ultimately indicted on, is in connection with benefiting from these fraudulently obtained loans. But I think it might be even more than that. All right. Anyway, so fun to dunk on her with this. Here's a post from her back on the Mar-a-Lago raid. I want to see voters showing the kind of overwhelming numbers at the polls that the FBI showed today at Mar-a-Lago. That came back to bite her. Here is her daughter talking about the raid. And let me go ahead and play some of her comments for you. That's the woman you see right there in that shawl. Here's what she had to say about it to a reporter.
I don't know what the hell is going on. We're trying to figure it out. That's all I know.
Does it have to do with the business here or the cannabis shop?
I don't know. Both of them have our Lucas name on it, so we don't know what's going on.
Have you been told anything by the FBI?
No. Nothing.
What are your thoughts?
I have no idea.
I think I saw your mom here, then she left. Is that true?
Yeah, she's gone. My mom's gone. She's not here today.
Right. What time did this all go down?
I have no idea. We've been out here about an hour, so I think so.
Does it?
Of course, we know that she actually does know more than she's saying, because we see here she gets handed a document that I believe is the search warrant. I would imagine that she's there and she asks them, "Hey, what search? I want to see the copy of the search warrant." See, she's there flipping through it right there. So I think she wanted to see some paperwork on what offices you're searching, and I want to see the search warrant that allows you to do this. I think that's what she's holding in her hand. Don't know for sure, of course, but I think she knows a bit more than what she's saying here. And I also think they damn well know about this case. So when they say they don't have any idea, yeah, you got an idea. All right. Now I want to play for you what Governor Spanberger had to say about this, and just go ahead and look at her face. I mean, this is the witch of the East. This is very much the witch of the East. Does she look bothered? Is that the face of someone whose political ally has just had the FBI in and out of her properties?
To you about what's happening a few hours away. Senator Louise Lucas's home, our office rather, was raided by the FBI. At this point, do you stand by the senator, or are you concerned? Because our sources are telling us this is about bribery and corruption.
Just I'm gonna mute it. Look at her face. Does that look like someone trying to force a smile? Trying to hold back a frown? Or does that look like someone trying to restrain a bit of a smile and who is actually experiencing a little bit of happiness at what is occurring? She doesn't look stressed, does she? Now, she's a witch, so it's not like she's going to be over there glowing like a princess or something. But I mean, look at that smile. At the beginning of this video, look at that smile. She does have a glow right there. She's got a little bit of a glow right there at the beginning. She's got a glow in her cheeks. She is very, very pleased to have a media person asking her about the FBI raiding Senator Louise Lucas. Now, she catches herself before she speaks and she drops that smile a bit. Let's go ahead and listen to her answer now.
What's happening a few hours away. Senator Louise Lucas's home, our office rather, was raided by the FBI. At this point, do you stand by the senator, or are you concerned? Because our sources are telling us this is about bribery and corruption.
Well, certainly I am aware of the law enforcement action that occurred in Portsmouth, and I am awaiting more details to become public before weighing in with any strong public comment. And as more information becomes available, I look forward to making further comment.
I want to talk to you about what's happening a few hours away.
Yeah. So, guys, I think I don't think Spanberger is one bit upset about this. And while it may seem natural to Fox to run a headline like this and to assume that Lucas is an ally of Spanberger, us in the state, we've watched Lucas attack Spanberger over and over again, and attack her very recently, just like last week, and being quite nasty to her. And there's a power struggle happening in Virginia between the senators and the governor's office. And yeah, this governor here has, they've her Senate and House representatives, they have control. The Democrats have control of the state. And they're going to town with just a wish list of all sorts of things. They're going to tax streaming services here. They're taxing barbershops. They're taxing everything, lawn equipment. I mean, they're taxing everything they can possibly think of in this state, and as well as assault weapons bans and all sorts of stuff. It's horrible. Please pray for me, my family. But that doesn't mean that Democrats are getting along and they're on a honeymoon right now. Leftists are pretty famous for being knives out for each other as much as they are knives out for their opponents. And that's very much the case here. So, yeah. All right. Actually, before I say goodbye, let me just check and see if there's any breaking news on this from Fox or, anything else. Before I close this out, I don't see anything there. Let me go to the Richmond Times or one of the local newspapers and see. And I'll check Bill Malugan. Has he posted anything? Nope. That was his last post. That what I just showed you. Let me refresh Virginia Pilot and just some other local newspapers I have on another screen. See if they have any new reporting, because sometimes the local papers are going to be much better at this. This was last updated at 6:20 p.m. So just a few minutes ago. Anything new here? They support program, organization executive director. She said her programs had to be suspended for the day and clients were asked to return home while the FBI conducted their activities. A man who identified himself as Lucas's grandson and a cashier at the cannabis outlet said the FBI ran in there while we were working and told him to leave. The man who declined to provide his name said Lucas was on the scene Wednesday morning. He said he expects the store to open on Thursday. Well, I wonder if that is this man in the Philadelphia cap who is right there. I wonder if that's that guy right there. Not sure, but could be. And then, I showed you the other men who were taken into custody. They were arrested, but that obviously he wasn't arrested. So I wonder if these guys were arrested because they had something on them that was illegal. It's interesting that these three other men were arrested. Maybe there's some other operation going on at that cannabis store. It's interesting that some people in the store were arrested and some weren't. State Corporation Commission business records list Lucas as the applicant for the cannabis outlet in Portsmouth. However, the current status of the business was listed as inactive. Probably because it's owned by that Virginia Freedom LLC or whatever that this guy got the loan for, that Upton got the loan under. All right, FBI officials were seen moving boxes out the store. Lucas, who has held the office for 34 years, often different, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Here's some new information. FBI activity was reported at other locations in Portsmouth and Norfolk Wednesday, but it was unclear whether it was related to the raid on Lucas's business. Watching the scene from outside the cannabis outlet, Michelle Boyd of Portsmouth said First Cousins Automotive, located at 1428 Portsmouth Boulevard, which is just 2 blocks or so from her house, was raided at 6:30 a.m. She said she heard a loud boom and someone on the megaphone telling the people inside the address to come out with their hands up. The sole worker at First Cousins Wednesday afternoon confirmed the FBI's presence earlier, but he wasn't there at the time and didn't know anything about it. In recent weeks, Lucas has been digging in her heels on budget negotiations, blah, blah, blah. Lucas also emerged victorious in a public spat with Youngkin. Ooh, so that's interesting. First Cousins Automotive. Is that owned by I'm going to look this up. Okay, so we don't know if this is actually related, but it's the only other lead I've found as to another property FBI was at. So this lady in that article said that the FBI raided this location at 6:30 in the morning. And if you look on Google Maps, it's First Cousins Auto Repair, and it says it's permanently closed. But that's the building, and it looks like an auto repair shop. And it's just, I mean, it's not close, but it's, it's down this street right here, Elm Avenue, and then you take a right and you're there that's Lewis's office right there, or Lucas's office right there. So it's not too far away. It's a dozen blocks away, 10 blocks away, but they're small blocks. And you go here. I didn't look at the front of it, but on Google Maps, it says it's permanently closed. This picture is from April 2026. It says First Cousins Automotive. Image capture, wow, image capture last month. It doesn't look closed at all, does it? Wow, image capture, April 2026. First Cousins Auto Repair, 763-9373. That's a different phone number than what's listed on Google. Google does say permanently closed. I looked up on the Virginia Business Records website to see what it revealed about it. And I didn't find a First Cousins, but I found a Cousins Automotive. And that one was in Hampton, Virginia was its address, which is north of this. Its address was quite a ways away. I mean, it's a different city, but not too far away. It's, now I'm all confused. It's up here. So that's too far. I mean, it's not too far. It's still within it's still within the area she represents, I believe, as a senator. They could be connected. I don't know. But it says on here that it's inactive and that its status date as of 2023, it was closed. So I did look up First Cousins and I didn't get anything. But when I typed in Cousins Automotive, I got that, which it's interesting that it's so close in a neighboring city to this. So they could be connected. Let me see. Let me try again. I'm going to try again while you guys are watching. Why is this thing taking so long to... There we go. Entity name. Nope. What if I do Cousins Auto Repair? That brings up one in Richmond. I don't know why this website keeps doing that. I have to refresh it. Let me see if I just do First Cousins. Or One Street Cousins. First Cousins Lawn Care in Hampton. Not the same thing. Okay. So I don't know if it's connected. I mean, this lady could be mistaken about it being an FBI raid. It could have been something different. But interesting. I would totally believe that this might be one of the properties. She might own this property. When I looked it up, the names on it didn't say anything that connected excuse me, that connected to the senator. And pardon me. I didn't find a website for it. The website that comes up for Cousins Automotive here is for one in Massachusetts. So I traced it that far. The other thing I wanted to point out about this article is that it makes the comment here. Much of Lucas's family had come together to the lawmaker's Portsmouth home by afternoon. The senator's daughter, Lisa Lucas Burke, said her mother was on the phone with her attorneys as the news played on living room TV. I look forward to whatever comes of this. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. My link tree is in the description of the show and also in my profile wherever you're watching or listening to this. If you would please consider a like, a comment, a share. And if you're very interested in following this case, consider supporting me through one of my links here or a subscription over at justhuman.substack.com. I have a new episode of my podcast coming out, and I've recorded several videos recently. Just uploaded another one right before I started recording this on Cole Allen's indictment. And if and when this senator is indicted, you can bet I will be paying close attention to it. I'll make a playlist to cover it, and I'll put those playlists on my Rumble and YouTube. All right, stay human. I'll see you next time. The wrong folder. All right, let me update you a little bit on man, there's stuff going on with Fulton County, but I don't know if I want to get into it right now. Thinking. It is, some of this news is older than what the other news is. Maybe I should get into this. Okay, let's spend some time talking about what's been going on in Fulton County, Georgia, and with the 2020 election. The case, well, yeah, let me start here. You may remember that earlier this year in January, there was an FBI raid on a storage facility in Fulton County, Georgia, that housed their election records for 2020 and other elections, I would assume, but it definitely housed records for the 2020 election. All sorts of records, electronic records, paper records, etc. And a number of search warrants were obtained by DOJ. You may remember that D&I Gabbard extraordinarily was on site for the raid, as well as some other people from the FBI, like regular people from the FBI were there, but also there was one of the assistant directors was there, if I remember correctly. Anyway, Georgia, the clerk of Georgia of elections sued for the return of property, saying, no, you can't have, it's a violation of people's rights. It's a violation of whatever. You guys, they're trying to stop DOJ from being able to look at the records that they got. So the material seized in that raid pursuant to search warrant, they filed this lawsuit to try and stop DOJ from having a look at that material. It's called Pitts v. United States. And so since that time period, the DOJ has not been able to review all of that material that they seized. You may also remember that I made a video way back then about how the United States, how Pam Bondi, AG Bondi, had named someone as special counsel to look into this matter. In fact, it's my best performing video by far over on YouTube with 58,000 views. AG Bondi named special prosecutor to conduct election fraud probes nationwide. This is still true. His name is Thomas Albus. He's the U.S. attorney in Missouri, and I think it's Eastern District of Missouri. And he is still empowered to conduct election probes nationwide. There's also someone else who's been named. I'll get to that in a minute. But since getting that search warrant and collecting those records, he hasn't been able to go through those records and those materials and continue the investigation as relates to them because of this lawsuit called Pitts v. United States. Well, yesterday, judge ruled on it. And he said, sorry, but you lose, Fulton County. DOJ can go ahead and look at these records. They don't have to return it. And in his 68-page opinion, he went through a bunch of material on why. He went through all the arguments, and he concluded that what the defendants are asking for, even though lots of things about this are unprecedented, about this case, about the search warrant, there's a lot of things going on here that are unprecedented, he said. But the Ritchie test, which is the test for whether or not the government can review the evidence it seizes pursuant to a search warrant, the Ritchie test has been in place for nearly 50 years, and its limits apply no matter who the government is investigating. And guess what? He cites a Trump case, the Mar-a-Lago case. He cites the Mar-a-Lago raid. And I love that. Isn't that poetic? Isn't it poetic that in telling Fulton County, sorry, you can't have those election records back that DOJ sees, those 2020 election records, you can't have them back. Isn't it poetic that he points to the Mar-a-Lago raid and Trump not getting his materials back as not a basis, but as a precedent-setting decision? It's almost like maybe some guy named Just Human was onto something when he wrote this templates article about when, and subtitled it, when FBI raids are actually good news, and wrote about how this was a precedent-setting case. The Mar-a-Lago raid was going to lead to some really good things. I don't know. Maybe I get things right every now and then. Not always, but every now and then I hit a home run. I get a lot of base hits. I strike out sometimes. But every now and then I hit a home run. That was a home run. All right. Anyway, so DOJ can now start reviewing this stuff. Thomas Albus can take a look at it. And I really like here, I want to give you a little bit more of an idea. Go to Shipwreck Crew, career prosecutor, now defense attorney. He highlighted something really important here that really only a prosecutor, former federal prosecutor, would notice, which is this didn't get much notice yesterday when Fulton County lost its motion for the return of 600 boxes of election documents from 2020, including all of the actual ballots that were cast and counted. That's what the special prosecutor, the special counsel, who's investigating election fraud nationwide, that's what he now has in his hands and has access to. The current leadership at DOJ is Todd Blanche, serving as acting attorney general while also being the confirmed deputy attorney general. And Stanley Woodward is associate attorney general, and that's DOJ position number 3 on the ladder. Thomas Albus was given nationwide authority by former AG Bondi to look into election fraud claims from 2020. R. Trent McCotter is the principal assistant and is the first among equals as the multiple assistant deputies that report directly to the deputy AG Blanche. Okay. This position is functionally the chief of staff for the AG. Michael Weisbush is a specially appointed senior counsel to Woodward. Best description of that job I can offer is that those positions are focused on one particular matter. This fight with Fulton County was over a search warrant, a criminal matter. That would typically involve someone like Albus and whatever staff of assistant U.S. attorneys he has working on the project that Bondi gave him. We know they now have a grand jury subpoena, which I'm going to get to in just a minute, seeking out witnesses to testify. The fact that the fight over the possession of the seized election materials was waged by personnel out of the number 2 and number 3 DOJ job slots tells you the level of importance attached to it. Yesterday, they won when the judge denied the motion. Now, Albus and his team can begin looking at the documents that Fulton County has kept under lock and key for 6 years. And what he's referring to is if you look at the motions filed by DOJ in this case, specifically against the motion for return of property, which is document entry number 30, right here. Here's the amended motion for return of property that was filed by the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections. That's the main issue here in this case. The responses filed to that were they were signed by Stanley Woodward, Albus, Duva, who's the Assistant Attorney General in the Criminal Division, McCotter, Associate Deputy Attorney General. There's Weisbush. There's Cooch, which is one of the trial attorneys and senior counsel for the Criminal Division. That's their first reply to it in opposition. Their supplemental brief against it, which was only 9 pages long and was filed just a couple weeks ago, if I remember correctly. It doesn't really matter. Signed McCotter, Woodward, Weisbush, and Albus. So you have some of the most powerful people, most prominent people in DOJ, plus the special attorney empowered with investigating election issues across the country. That's notable. What's also notable is look who was trying to get this stuff back for Fulton County. Look at the attorneys here. Abby Lowell, Norm Eisen. Abby Lowell and his team, and Norm Eisen and his team, I think they're working for free for Fulton County. That's how much this fight matters. Think on that. All right, now we have some new news that it actually came out before this decision here, but goes right along with it. DOJ has demanded via federal grand jury subpoena the identities of every worker who staffed the 2020 election in Fulton County, Georgia, according to new court records. And I have those court records over here and here. The demand targets employees of Fulton County elections as well as volunteer poll workers. Those workers who likely number in the thousands. It is not known what the Justice Department intends to do with the names of election workers, but my first guess is they want to interview them. The county received the grand jury subpoena for workers' names on April 20th, according to court records. The existence of the subpoena became public on Monday evening when lawyers for Fulton County filed a motion attempting to block it. The county board argued that the subpoena cannot yield any evidence that could result in criminal prosecution because, among other things, the statute of limitations have expired for any purported 2020 election crimes, which I understand them bringing that up. You're entitled to whatever defenses you can possibly create for yourself, but saying it's too late to charge me with any crime I might have committed is not really the best thing to lead with. Also, it's important to note, as I have noted before, the statute of limitations for conspiracy, the clock on it resets every time an act is committed in furtherance of the conspiracy, including acts to cover up the conspiracy. So while not everybody involved let's just say, who committed a crime of some nature way back in 2020. While you can't charge everybody now, the statute of limitations has certainly run for some people in some acts. That's just the facts, okay? But for those that you can prove were involved in a conspiracy to engage in those criminal activities, the statute of limitations on that resets every time they commit some sort of act that is in furtherance of the conspiracy, and that includes covering it up. And covering it up includes lying about it or stating things that you know to be untrue, because you're trying to protect your role or someone else's role in the conspiracy. And there's no statute of limitations on that. So that will be, we're going to be hearing a lot about that. If this ever goes to criminal charges, we're going to be hearing a lot about statute of limitations. And that's why they're going to have to go with some sort of conspiracy charge, like an 18 U.S.C. 371, or the conspiracy against rights, which is, I can't think of the statute number right now. It's going to have to be some sort of conspiracy charge that allows for them to bring the other charges in, right? Because that's how you get around the statute of limitations. The subpoenas, and now here's big news. The subpoenas that I have right here that are for the names and contact information of everyone, volunteer or paid, who worked the 2020 election in Fulton County. The subpoenas are from the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of North Carolina, Dan Bishop, who at the end of March of this year was appointed by AG Bondi as a special attorney to the AG authorized to pursue election-related probes across the country, just like Albus was last September. So Albus sought after and obtained search warrants from a Georgia magistrate for that raid on Fulton County storage facility for those 600 boxes of election records. Dan Bishop has been given the same authority, it turns out, and he's going after the individuals who worked the elections. Again, how you like them apples? Here's what the new subpoena is seeking. Rosters of election staff members who served in the November 2020 general election, individuals assigned to review mail-in ballots, individuals assigned to the voter review panel and board, individuals assigned to mobile voting locations, individuals assigned to transfer results to or from media or to transport ballots, ballot stock, or media, individuals employed or contracted by the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections, individuals who worked or volunteered on election day, including people who reviewed or tabulated ballots, individuals who worked or volunteered for the risk limiting audit, individuals who worked or volunteered for the recount, and individuals who served as precinct managers and assistant managers. The motion to quash the subpoena argues it's improper. It's an improper use of that power. The FBRE, the Fulton Board of Registration and Elections, says the subpoena does not provide or does not require the FBRE to provide these records to the grand jury. Instead, it directs the records be routed to the U.S. Attorney himself so that he can, quote, pursue election-related probes across the country on behalf of DOJ. So they say that this is a misuse of the grand jury subpoena power because they say that by its terms, the subpoena does not suggest that the grand jury is conducting an investigation on its own. But I have to disagree with them. When I look at the subpoena, it says you are commanded to appear in the United States District Court at the time, date, and place shown. And the place is grand jury number 1-26 at the United States Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia. So maybe there's something I'm not understanding here, but it sure seems like this subpoena is directing them to give these records to the grand jury at the courthouse. not to a U.S. attorney's office. Nowhere in here does it say send the records to Dan Bishop in North Carolina. It says that all records are supposed to go to that grand jury. The email that they are to use is USAGAN grand jury at usdoj.gov. If you mail the documents requested, it's supposed to go to attention grand jury, U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta, Georgia. You can give it to the AUSA right there, it says. But I mean, maybe I'm not understanding something here. I don't know. I've seen grand jury subpoenas before, and this is how they normally look. The place that you're supposed to send the documents to is usually says grand jury number whatever, United States Courthouse, in whatever district it's in. So it seems right to me. I don't think they have a better argument though, so that's what they went with. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So there's probably going to be another lawsuit like this Pitts one to try and block all of this, and we'll have to go through another civil action here for the return to block them from getting it. But now we have 2 U.S. attorneys that are conducting 2020 election probes. And one of them now has access to 600 boxes of 2020 election records from Fulton County. So indeed, how do you like them apples? I got a quick update in United States v. Allen, the criminal case against the alleged assassin who went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner and tried to rush a U.S. Secret Service checkpoint, fired off a blast from a shotgun, and then either was tripped or tackled or tripped on his own down the stairs and was neutralized as a threat. In a previous video, which I just published yesterday, I speculated that when the indictment comes against Allen, right now he's only been charged by complaint with 3 counts. Or at that time he was. I speculated that there might be an additional charge in an indictment from a grand jury that included something like attempted murder for him discharging his firearm against a Secret Service agent. We know that one U.S. Secret Service agent was hit. And I went back to look at some news that and some commentary by the prosecutor for the DC district. That's Janine Pirro. And she had done the rounds on several news outlets, one of them being CNN, where she had told Jake Tapper, I believe it was, that the agent that was struck was definitely hit by the shotgun blast from Cole Allen, and that it was one of the buckshot pellets was lodged in his vest. And I speculate that might be the case, that while Allen didn't get a direct shot off at an agent, we know that it hit a vest. It might have just been that one of the pellets hit him and the other pellets sprayed against the wall or went somewhere else. And the agents were probably, by now, the FBI's removed all of those pellets and traced them to the gun. And we know that from the detention hearing, even though the defense decided they didn't want to contest the detention, that the prosecutors wanted to go ahead and file their exhibits and show what all they had on Allen. And those exhibits included images of the buckshot. And if I scroll down right here, there's the shotgun. There it is at the bottom of the first several steps of the stairs. I think he might have fallen right here. I'm not sure, or the gun may just been kicked down those stairs and he might have still been up on the above them. Here is the round that was spent that was still jammed inside of his shotgun. He failed to eject it. Here are the buckshot rounds, and you can see there's a few pellets in each one, maybe 6, 8 pellets in each one. Anyway, so I went and saw that, yeah, this agent was hit by one of those pellets. Well, I was wrong that it was going to be an attempted murder charge for him firing the blast from a shotgun into a U.S. Secret Service agent. But I was right that there would be an indictment and there would be an additional charge related to him doing that. And that charge is assaulting an officer or employee of the United States with a deadly weapon. Yesterday, like right after I published my video, the indictment against Thomas Allen was filed, It included the same 3 charges that were already there: attempting to assassinate the president of the U.S., transportation of a firearm and with intent to commit a felony, and use or carrying of a firearm and discharging it during the commission of a violent crime. And then it added assault on an officer or employee of the U.S. with a deadly weapon. And this indictment doesn't give us any more than those charges. It just states the charge. That's it. So that is not a count that's not murder, but it is assault on a U.S. Secret Service agent with a deadly weapon. So that means that Cole Allen is facing up to life in prison for the first count of attempting to kill the president. And then on the second one, it's going to be up to 20 years, I think it was. It's an enhanced penalty that they're going for, up to 20 years, plus the fines, which he's not going to care about. And then up to 10 years, I think, for the third one, which is transportation of the firearm, and then up to 5 to 7 years for the discharging of a firearm in commission of a violent crime, I believe it is. But if he gets it, they get him on the first one, it'll be life in prison. So serious charging against Cole. Now, there was something else I wanted to cover. It's kind of impromptu. I'll cover this. I talked about Faruqui or Faruqui or however you say the judge's name, the magistrate judge who was handling the case. And I ended up gathering a little bit of stuff on him after I published the video. And I thought it was worth revisiting again, just to emphasize the understanding is greater than reacting approach here to the news that's fed to us, because so many outlets and accounts, they lead with the outrage. They lead with the bait to try to get you to bite into it. And there's a psychological reason that they do it and a marketing reason. And those reasons are that if you have an emotional reaction to a news story, particularly if it's a negative emotion, you're much more likely to engage with that posting or that video. You're much more likely to comment on something you disagree with. You're much more likely to share something that you're aggravated by or upset by. It's just, that's human psychology. That's also marketing. They use that emotional lure to draw you in and get you to engage with it, because after all, engagement equals dollars in their pocket. So that's why news organizations do it. That's why the expression, if it bleeds, it leads, is a real thing and a real practice. And that's why accounts and different alternative media and legacy media always go for the emotional play, and often at the expense of information that would actually be useful to you, and at the expense of context and perspective and other facts that would help you better understand, the whole thing. And so, and would probably dilute your emotional reaction if you were aware of all of it. So it was exactly that when it came to the story of magistrate judge in DC apologizes to Trump assassin. And you saw tons of people repeat that and make, whine about it a bunch and moan about it, just like they did the Secret Service agent who fired his gun 5 times and yet failed to hit a moving target. Suddenly everybody's an expert on pistol shooting and an expert at shooting a pistol at a target that's running at an angle. Suddenly everybody's an expert on that online, right? So anyway, I did a little research after I made that video, and I just wanted to revisit that with you. That's actually the wrong thread. Where's the thread I wanted to grab? I don't see it. Let me go to I'll go to my X post on it. There's a lot of stuff on my X that I'm going to get to in a different video, because today is a huge news day about this lady. That's going to be a different video. It's not that. It's him being indicted. Where did it go? Aha. Here it is. Okay. So I'm just going to restate some of what I just did, but I'm going to end it with an emphatic point. On April 8th, 2022, a DC judge apologized to J6 defendant Lucas Denny over his processing and treatment while being transferred from where he was arrested in Texas on December 7th, 2021, to his preliminary hearing in DC months later. Denny was charged in December 2021 by an 8-count complaint that included assaulting police officers, physical violence with a weapon, obstruction, conspiracy, trespass, etc. Denny was due by law a preliminary hearing within 14 days and an indictment within 30 days. Neither happened on time. By March 2022, when the hearing and indictment finally had happened, Denny wasn't days past due these events, he was weeks past due. His counsel filed motions to dismiss based on this failure to hold the hearing and the failure to indict within 30 days. Those motions were denied because during the interim period, the DOJ had already filed a 1-count indictment that Denny decided he was going to plead to. He was facing, remember, all of these charges, and an 8-count complaint. They trimmed it down to a 1-count indictment, and he decided, I think I better just go ahead and plead to that. Understandable. The DC Magistrate Judge, who initially got Denny's case and who reviewed those motions, he went ahead and took a look at them, and he found that the DOJ had indeed violated Rule 5.1 and 18 U.S.C. 3060 by failing to provide Mr. Denny with a timely preliminary hearing after his initial appearance in the Western District of Texas. At a status hearing, meaning, guys, that he was arrested in Texas and he made his initial appearance, but he didn't have a preliminary hearing where the charges were read to him, and within 14 days that has to happen. That didn't happen. He got transferred to DC and just waited for weeks. And then he didn't get indicted within 30 days, which by statute is supposed to happen, I believe. Yeah, by statute, I believe. And that didn't happen either. So this guy was well over 30 days since he was arrested between, it was like early December, right? And December 7th, 2021, all the way up until March, early March, this guy was still waiting on an indictment and for his preliminary hearing. That's a due process violation. That's unfair to the defendant. It violates his rights. And he was in limbo in the DC jail during that time period. Not a fun place. At a status hearing on April 8th, 2022, the same judge took the time at the very beginning of that hearing to apologize profusely to Mr. Denny for how he had been treated, for the due process violations, for the delays, for the handling of his case between when he was arrested and eventually indicted on just 1 count and had reached the plea agreement. That judge said to Mr. Denny, "Hi, I'm Judge Faruqui. I'm going to be handling this hearing today. It's been quite a few twists and turns to get you here. And so what we're going to go through is I want you to first understand exactly what's happened that got us here today. And then I think the government has some facts maybe they can help update me with. And then I'll be hearing from Mr. Shipley, which is the defendant's attorney, to talk about the kind of where we are and what we have going forward. So I'm going to need you to bear with me as we go through this because this is not the norm. I can tell you that much. I cannot begin to express how deeply frustrated and apologetic I am on my end because you have been lost for more than 1 minute or 1 hour or 1 day, but for nearly a month or longer, really, when you calculate it. And Mr. Denny, there's just no excuse to treat a human being like that. Again, this is him talking to a J6 defendant who was originally arrested on a complaint that charged him with violently assaulting officers, physical violence with a weapon. It was a pipe that he was hitting officers with on J6th. Obstruction, conspiracy to break into the Capitol and riot and to obstruct the officers. I don't have a lot of sympathy for this guy. But he's a human being and he's a defendant like anyone else, and he's innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. And that's how the judge has to see him, and that's how our justice system has to treat people while they're defendants, regardless of what the charges are. Back to what Faruqui was telling him. There's no excuse to treat a human being like that. I don't need to tell you that, but it needs to be stated out loud. That is not how I would want to be treated if I were in your shoes, and it bears repeating that you are presumed innocent. I don't care how you're dressed, where you came from. When I look at you, I see a presumed innocent person, and there is no circumstance under which an innocent person and should be forgotten, and that is what happened here. Forgotten for over 30 days. And at the time, he's innocent. He's charged, under complaint. The indictment's past due, well past due. But regardless, he's still innocent. And the blame is not just on the United States Attorney's Office, it's on everyone, the judge went on. But that doesn't matter because you're the person who's been sitting and waiting. And none of my apologies or sorries are going to make up for what happened. But at the bare minimum, what I can do is just again tell you I'm sorry. I'm going to need you to bear with me. I can't promise you, I want to be very clear, I can't promise you that no matter what happened in the past is going to get you what you're requesting today in terms of your motion to release or your motion to dismiss. It is possible, unfortunately, the law may not be on your side. No matter what I say, I can tell you it is not the final word on any of this. Your counsel or the government may choose to appeal my decision either today or at a later date to the chief judge, and ultimately that can get appealed again. But no matter what happens with your case, and I may never see you again, I just want you to understand again, it is my job to make sure your rights are protected. And it is my job to remind you that you're presumed innocent. And although it is not my job, I do think it is important that I think about what would happen if I were sitting in your shoes. And I would not like to be treated the way that you have been treated. So I am sorry, I truly am, Mr. Denny. Now you compare that to the comments the same magistrate judge, Zia M. Faruqui, made in regards to Cole Thomas Allen when he apologized for Allen being put in restraints and then on being on suicide watch for a day or so. His apology makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? So, folks, perhaps the next time the media and politicians and the accounts, the influencers feed you rage bait about a judge, think or even research that subject just a little bit before you bite into that bait. Okay, got another update for you in the Cole Thomas Allen case. If you're interested, I am tracking this case. I have playlists on it on my Rumble and on my YouTube, which I clicked on those. YouTube, Rumble. There's playlists for both of those. And if you want to support my work there, if you want to support me buying documents and keeping me caffeinated, you can visit my link tree or the links in the description of this show. And there you'll find all the places to listen, follow, watch, and all the different ways to support. You can just buy me a cup of coffee if you want. You can buy yourself some honey or some bootleg products, some chili, salsa, seasoning. Summer's coming up. It's a great time to get bootleg products, by the way, for all your cookouts. I love their seasonings. Or you can go to justhuman.substack.com, sign up for a monthly subscription there. It's just $7, and you're basically buying me a cup of coffee and throwing a couple dollars into the Pacer fund so that I can keep buying these documents. Now, in the Cole Thomas Allen case, I already did videos updating on this case. The last one I did was just about him being indicted on 4 counts. And then I also talked about the silliness going on with the judge. And I'm not going to talk about that again today. I've already spent some time talking about the judge in the case. And guess what? That person is no longer the judge in the case. The new judge in the case, now that he has been indicted, it's no longer before the magistrate. It's now in front of District Judge Trevor Neal McFadden. And Trevor Neal McFadden is a Trump appointee from June 2017. And Trevor Neal McFadden is also a former police officer, a former deputy sheriff, a former clerk of the Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit, was a deputy sheriff from 2007 to 2016. He was counsel to the Deputy Attorney General from 2007 to 2009. He was assistant U.S. attorney from 2009 to 2013 in DC. He was in private practice for a few years in DC, and then in 2017 was named by President Trump to the bench. And anytime I see that a former police officer, former sheriff, and former prosecutor is now made a judge, I feel pretty good about that. I feel pretty dang good about that. So that's who Allen has as his judge now. And there's been an interesting, since being indicted, there's been an interesting filing that just occurred. It just occurred, is it today or yesterday? Yesterday, I believe. Yesterday on the 7th. From Allen's team, motion to disqualify United States Attorney and others from this case. This is pretty interesting. Now you see these occasionally. We've dealt with one with Lindsay Halligan. And when I first saw this, I thought, oh my God, not again. But it's not that. The basis for this motion to disqualify is not at all the same that the motion for disqualify Lindsay Halligan was. No, this one is because Janine Pirro, the U.S. attorney here, and Todd Blanche and Kash Patel, who are all involved in the prosecution of Cole Thomas Allen, were there at the incident on April 25th, where the alleged conduct took place. According to the government's theory of this case, some of the targets of Cole Thomas Allen were Todd Blanche and Janine Pirro, maybe not Kash Patel, because in his email he said everyone except Kash Patel. I don't know why he said except Kash Patel. I don't know, but he did. So their argument is, hey, the government alleges that on this night at this location where the prosecution team was at that time and were witnesses to at least some parts of what they allege went down, they can't prosecute him. It's a conflict. They say, according to the prosecution's allegations on April 25th, 2026, Mr. Cole Allen was stopped by U.S. Secret Service at the Washington Hilton Hotel, armed with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, 6 knives, and a .38 caliber pistol loaded with 9 rounds of ammunition. He is also alleged to have had 2 extra magazines, 16 additional shotgun cartridges on his person. Prosecutors have characterized these actions as creating the potential for a mass shooting inside a room full of the highest-ranking officials in the U.S. government. At least 2 of those very same high-ranking officials are now responsible for making the unbiased and dispassionate discretionary decisions that the justice system requires, those being Blanche and Pirro. These include approving the charges and corresponding penalties Mr. Allen faces, any plea offer he would be extended, and a detached assessment of his personal history and characteristics. Although the evidence of Mr. Allen's intent is far from clear based on the evidence disclosed to the public, the prosecution, primarily through media appearances, as no discovery has yet been provided to the defense, has provided every indication that it will charge Mr. Allen with numerous counts alleging that he intended to do harm to administration officials present at the Washington Hilton Hotel on the evening of April 25th, 2026. Relevant to this motion are Department of Justice employees, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, both of whom were present at the scene during the alleged incident. Both individuals have made statements indicating that they were witnesses to the events at the Washington Hilton that evening. Both stated that they heard gunshots and saw the reaction of the Secret Service to those gunshots. In addition, both individuals are high-ranking members of the U.S. government and administration officials. Moreover, these individuals may well be named complainants, or at least purported victims or witnesses of the offenses that constitute relevant conduct. In its initial conference, the Department of Justice noted that the plain text file allegedly sent by Mr. Allen stated in part, quote, "Make no mistake," he says, "targeting administration officials, quote unquote." In the same press conference, U.S. Attorney Pirro said, quote, "We will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. The government has not ruled out charging Mr. Allen with offenses against any members of the administration, including Ms. Pirro or Mr. Blanche." And by the email that he sent, where he says he's going to rank his targets down in order of their highest authority in the government, position in the government, they could conceivably charge him with attempted assassination of Trump, Vance, the first lady, the second lady, Blanche, Pirro. Just they could just go down the list of people who were attendants, and they could charge him with one count of attempting to assassinate or assault each one of those individuals. They could make it that granular and just a charge for each one who might have been shot or knifed. Finally, Ms. Pirro has identified President Trump as the primary alleged victim of Mr. Allen. Ms. Pirro and President Trump have a well-documented relationship for over 3 decades. In fact, thinking about it, if they find a document on his laptop or text messages in his phone or notes or something that indicated desire and intent on that evening to specifically target not just Trump, but to target others, I think they would bring a superseding indictment adding that count. I think the way his email is worded, he indicates he wants to take out as many officials as possible, starting with the top, is how he phrases it, meaning Trump. But I think if they can find more specific information that he planned to target others in addition to Trump, they can and maybe should charge him with each individual person that he might have attacked. So anyway, their argument is that they need to be disqualified and there needs to be a different prosecuting team brought in. And they highlight that DOJ regulation provides that no employee shall participate in a criminal investigation or prosecution if he has a personal relationship with any person or organization substantially involved in the conduct that is the subject of the investigation or prosecution. Indeed, the DOJ manual directs U.S. attorneys to recuse, quote, where a conflict of interest exists or there is at least an appearance of a loss of impartiality, which pretty easily understood here how there could be a loss of impartiality on Janine Pirro's part and Todd Blanche's part because they were there at the scene and probably felt under threat, if the government's theory of the case is to be believed and taken for what on its face value. They were potentially in danger by the conduct they alleged this defendant engaged in. So how can they be the ones who prosecute? Also, I think the fact they were witnesses to it is just as or more so a reason for them to be disqualified from the case. And that brings up an interesting possibility here. What if, and by the way, I'm not swayed either way yet. I'm still thinking about, I quickly read through this motion before hitting record, and I'm still thinking about whether or not I'm compelled by it, but I'm initially compelled by it. And one of the things I find fun to think about is that surely Janine Pirro, the U.S. attorney, and the acting AG Blanche, who are intimately involved in this prosecution, surely they were in danger by their presence there at that dinner and them being in between where Allen was and where the president was, which was his primary target. And Allen in his email said that he was going to rank his targets in order of priority. And he said that he wanted to destabilize the entire federal government. Well, that's not that no, sorry, he didn't say that. They said it. They said that was what Allen wanted to do. They also said that Allen's conduct risked the lives of hundreds of people who were in attendance at that dinner. That includes their own lives. So think about this scenario where they are disqualified from this case. and the attorneys who prosecute it, who continue the prosecution, because this wouldn't end his prosecution. It would just mean a different set of attorneys come in and take over. So think about the scenario where Janine Pirro and Blanche are removed from it and then become witnesses. Because when you think about who could be the witnesses in this case, conceivably, the prosecution could call every guest who was there that night and staff who worked it and all of the U.S. Secret Service agents. Now, they wouldn't call everyone, but conceivably, the witnesses to this that could be called include the deputy or the acting AG and the U.S. attorney for this district. So I'm initially compelled to think that they could win on this motion to disqualify, and Janine Pirro would have to step aside and wouldn't be involved in the prosecution of this case. Again, it wouldn't end the case, but it would open the door possibly for her being a witness. And I don't think they would actually call her, but in the event that this goes to trial, let's say it plays out like the Ryan Ruth case did, I think they would absolutely call the U.S. Secret Service agents who were there, the one who was shot, the ones who were there at the magnetometer when he rushed through, the ones involved in taking him down, and they would be asked about their impressions of the nature of the threat. And then I could see them calling some other dinner guest for what they heard. Maybe not, but to give the jury the impression of how much danger they were in, I could see them calling in some witnesses who they think the jury might be sympathetic to, such as staffers or the TSA agents. I think it's risky to call in political appointees from the government as witnesses because it could be that someone on the jury has a particular animus against members of the administration, right? So that could backfire. But calling in people from the media to testify could offer a different set of risk, but it's interesting to think about. So anyway, this is 2 updates on Allen here that I find fascinating. The judge who's now overseeing the case, and then McFadden, and then this right here to disqualify Pirro, because I think this makes a good bit of sense. I'm interested to see what they argue against, or if she just says, you know what? Yeah, it makes sense. I was actually a witness to the crimes that the defendant committed that night. Thankfully, I escaped with my life. Interesting. Okay. Let's set that one down. And then SPLC. This will be the last thing I get to. So the last time I talked about the SPLC, and what was going on in this case, it was just a couple days ago. And I updated you on, oops, I didn't mean to click on my video. I meant to click on my playlist. I updated you on the fact that the SPLC was seeking grand jury transcripts, number one. And they're seeking those because they think the grand jury wasn't given all the information that they needed to come to the conclusion that there was probable cause to indict. And 2, that they were asking the judge to admonish the DOJ, particularly Blanche, Patel, others, for statements they had made about this case, and to order them to correct their statements, and then to prohibit them from making further extrajudicial prejudicial statements, which means statements that they make to the media that are prejudicial to their clients, the SPLC, right? Those are the most recent filings from the SPLC in this case. And as always, I got playlist on this on Rumble and YouTube. Well, the government has responded, and they responded with some pretty short filings here. The first one is a response to the motion to address. Actually, let me go. No, I'll do this one first. This one has to do with the extrajudicial statements and correcting the record. All right, where they basically say, you said mean things about my clients that were untrue, and the judge needs to order you to correct those, and then you need to be restricted in what you can say about the case. So the government's response to that is, at the heart of the motion from the defendants on this issue is the allegation that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche falsely, quote, said publicly that the government had no information that suggests that the SPLC then turned around and shared what they had learned with law enforcement from the informant program. Basically, they didn't give the full story. And the SPLC in their motion is basically saying, look, there's an explanation for what we were doing with these informants, and we regularly helped law enforcement using our informants. But something I pointed out in that video was they didn't specifically they didn't specifically address the informants that were mentioned in the indictment. They mentioned other informants that weren't named in the indictment and how they were helpful. So they failed to explain the conduct of the ones who were actually at issue in the indictment. Anyway, the relief requested by the defendant is, quote, an order directing the government to, 1, retract the false and unfairly prejudicial statements that Blanche made to Fox News. 2, refrain from making any further false or misleading statements about the allegations in the indictment. On April 26, 2026, Acting Attorney General Blanche made the following statement on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream. Quote, it is true that over the years they have selectively shared information with law enforcement. That's well documented, and there's no dispute there. They aren't charged with any of that conduct. The SPLC left out that part of the quote, didn't they? To the extent that any clarification was needed, Acting Attorney General Blanche's remarks on a major Sunday television program certainly suffice. Regarding defendant's second relief request, the United States of America has no intention of making any false or misleading statements in this case or any other case. It is well aware of its obligations under the law and applicable rules and will act accordingly. Respectfully submitted, 5th day of May, Kevin P. Davidson, the acting United States Attorney. Bravo. Bravo. I love it. Short and sweet, direct, cuts through all the BS that was in the SPLC's loaded filing. Now for the one that's actually more of a source of contention probably, and is much more important, I think. Their response, DOJ's response to the SPLC's motion for grand jury transcripts. So, of course, they're going to lead with the phrase from United States v. Phillips, the secrecy of the grand jury is sacrosanct. In my James Comey stuff, we went over grand jury transcripts and how important they are. I also talked about it a lot with Epstein and Maxwell. Whenever there was all that stuff trying to get at the Epstein grand jury material, and what they had to overcome to get at that. Here, the SPLC seeks to invade the province of the grand jury based on speculation and unsubstantiated allegations. The request lacks support in law and fact. Moreover, even crediting the SPLC's allegations, the request is overly broad. The SPLC is not entitled to the entirety of proceedings before the grand jury. And because the request is neither particularized nor compelling, the motion is due to be denied. Now, remember, I brought up how there has to be a particularized need. There has to be a particularized irregularity, meaning they have to have very specific information that shows. That's what particularized means. It has to be this specific thing right here was not adequately explained to the jury, or there's particular information the grand jury was not made aware of, and that's what gets you access to review it. In Comey's case, there was specific information that brought into question the grand jury proceedings, which allowed those transcripts to be reviewed by a judge. And those things were that there were 2 grand jury returns filed on the same evening, and one was accepted, but the other one wasn't. One was a failed indictment. There was something wrong in the signature or something. I can't remember right now. The grand jury was kept after hours. There were 2 presentations made to the grand jury over the same allegations to get the Comey documents, where there was 2 grand jury returns. the FBI agent who was a witness to the grand jury had been removed from the investigative team because he had been tainted by information he should have never seen that was attorney-client privileged, etc. And there was multiple things that they were able to argue to the judge that was in the court record. It wasn't speculated. It wasn't, we think maybe this happened. It was, this filing from the DOJ indicates this. This contemporary reporting indicates this and this. So, I remember Lindsay Halligan had to be instructed on how to go about presenting the grand jury indictment against Comey by the judge because she went about it the incorrect way. Okay. So April 21st, 2026, grand jury returned the 11-count indictment. As detailed in the indictment, the SPLC has a history tracing back to the 1980s of paying extremists to be informants. Some of those field sources were not just run-of-the-mill informants. Rather, these Fs were leaders of the same extremist groups the SPLC publicly vowed to bring down. In some cases, donated funds were used for the promotion of the extremist groups and the commission of various state and federal crimes. To effectuate this scheme of concealing payments to the field sources, SPLC employees opened multiple bank accounts in the names of fictitious entities, such as the Center for Investigative Agency, Fox Photography, and Rare Book Warehouses. These entities had no bona fide employees nor conducted any actual business. Instead, they served solely as the means to secretly pay field sources. The law governing grand jury disclosures says that grand jury proceedings, both state and federal, have long been protected by the veil of secrecy. Indeed, the proper functioning of the grand jury system depends upon the secrecy of the grand jury proceedings. That is because witnesses could be warned or could be threatened. Investigative targets could be warned about the grand jury proceeding. It's easily understood why they have to be secret. The long tradition of grand jury secrecy is enshrined in Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure Rule 6E. SPLC's motion fails at every step. The SPLC has shown neither compelling nor particularized reasons to justify disclosure of the grand jury materials. Nothing they allege overrides the interest in maintaining the grand jury secrecy, and even assuming otherwise, the request is overbroad and not tailored to address a specific need. Instead, it is a fishing expedition. As the party requested grand jury materials, the SPLC bears the burden to show that their need trumps the public interest in the grand jury's remaining secrecy, and they failed to meet that burden. The SPLC has not shown how the grand jury transcript would prevent possible injustice. They haven't offered any facts to support their claim that something was left out from the proceeding or that the grand jury was misinstructed in some way. Moreover, the public comments in question, whether the SPLC ever shared information obtained from its field sources with law enforcement, are simply not relevant to the charges in the indictment. This case is about fraudulently obtaining money from donors, lying to banks, and concealing payments to the same organizations the SPLC publicly told donors they were fighting against. Yes, I made that point in that previous video that, let's say, I said that it doesn't, even if they had shared information about these specific Fs with law enforcement, that doesn't make the conduct that they were engaged in and that they're charged with legal. What makes what they were doing illegal is they made false statements to banks, and they concealed that they were paying the same, they were sending money to the same groups that they told their donors they were trying to take down. Nor does the SPLC need access to secret grand jury materials to investigate alleged infirmities in the indictment. The SPLC alleges the indictment is fundamentally flawed on its face. If that assertion is accurate, then there is no need to probe into the secrecy of the grand jury because the dismissal of the indictment would not require disclosure of a matter that occurred before the grand jury. They can just file their motion to dismiss and argue why the case should be dismissed. Moreover, SPLC's reliance on United States v. Comey is misplaced. The SPLC argues that the court's reasoning in Comey applies with equal force to the SPLC. No. Including the court's concerns that statements by the prosecutor to the grand jurors that on their face appear to be fundamental misstatements of the law that could compromise the integrity of the grand jury process. That was another thing that Lindsay Halligan did poorly. But the district court in Comey drew its conclusions from an in-camera review of the grand jury transcript, not from speculative assertions. That is correct. The judge looked at it first. Moreover, misstatements of the law were hardly the only underlying basis for the court's decision to disclose all grand jury materials. Finally, the Comey court recognized that in that case, the traditional policies underlying grand jury secrecy were only moderately applicable because the grand jury's role was over and the statute of limitations had expired. So there was no danger that release of grand jury materials could impact future grand jury proceedings. The same is not true here. Thus, this case and Comey are hardly comparable. They're looking at bringing more charges, aren't they? That's what's being intimated here. Because the grand jury's role was over and the statute of limitations has expired, so there is no danger of the release of materials that could impact future grand jury proceedings. That's how it was. That was the situation in the Comey case. But that is not true here. That's a juicy nugget right there. All right, SPLC has not shown a compelling and particularized need for disclosure. To do so, the SPLC must show that circumstances had created certain difficulties peculiar to this case, which could be alleviated by access to specific grand jury materials without doing disproportionate harm to the salutary purpose of secrecy embodied in the grand jury process. The SPLC speculates that the prosecutor may have misinformed the grand jury as to the applicable law, but such speculation is not enough. Were it so, such an allegation would warrant disclosure in every case. But concisely, the SPLC has not shown how the grand jury materials would alleviate any specific concerns to this case, outside of a potential need to file a motion to dismiss. And particularized need is not shown by a general allegation that the grand jury materials are necessary for preparation of the motion to dismiss. So they can't just say, well, we're filing a motion to dismiss, and so we need to look at the grand jury stuff to help us file that motion to dismiss. Doesn't work that way. There has to be something very, very specific about the grand jury proceeding, and you have to have information to that effect that you can show the court and say, we need to look at this more carefully because we think something went wrong here. And then that could form the basis of a motion to dismiss, such as what happened with Comey. Here, moreover, the need for continued secrecy is at its highest given the ongoing investigation. I like reading that. Moreover, additional factors such as the nature of the charges and investigation into a complex financial scheme, the potential use of cooperating witnesses, and the possibility of superseding charges all weigh against disclosure. Ooh. Yes. Expect it. Expect it, guys. Expect a superseding indictment. Expect cooperating witnesses and more charges. The SPLC cannot show that their alleged need for grand jury materials trumps the need for grand jury secrecy. And then the request is overbroad. It's not specific enough. It's a blanket request. Perhaps recognizing that its request is overly broad, the SPLC request, at a minimum, to have a look at the prosecutor's introductory remarks and legal instructions provided to the grand jury. And in support of that contention, the SPLC cites a District of Montana case, which, in turn, cites a Ninth Circuit case. These cases, the SPLC represents, stand for the proposition that, quote, unlike the substance of grand jury proceedings, a prosecutor's introductory remarks and legal instructions provided to the grand jury are not presumptively covered by Rule 6E's secrecy requirement, and so they don't require a particularized need to be met. But the case of Alter does not support the SPLC's request. Let's see. Did it give me United States v. Alter, Ninth Circuit, 1973. Alter does not support the SPLC's request. It did not, as the SPLC represents, hold that the prosecutor's interactions with the grand jury related to a particular investigation are not covered by grand jury secrecy. Rather, it merely recognized that the court's general instructions to the grand jury are not covered. In any case, so what they did was, this is not the Ninth Circuit in Alabama. This is the Fourth Circuit under Clarence Thomas. The Ninth Circuit, the SPLC reached for a Ninth Circuit case to try and argue their position that at a minimum, they should be able to review the legal instructions and introduction remarks by the prosecutor to the grand jury in the SPLC grand jury indictment. Very smartly, this the DOJ went and looked at the Ninth Circuit case that is concerned there, and used that to override or to negate what the SPLC was arguing. In any case, SPLC has failed to cite any authority in the 11th Circuit. Actually, this is not the 4th. This is the 11th Circuit. Sorry. Virginia is the 4th. Binding or otherwise in support of its contention that the prosecutor's remarks and instructions to the grand jury are not covered by grand jury secrecy. Good job, Kevin P. Davidson. I don't think they're going to win on this. I think the SPLC is going to start out with some L's in this case. So, yeah, I think they're going to start out with some L's. There's a new order while I've been recording. What is this? It is ordered that by May 14th, defendant shall file a motion regarding defendant's proposed briefing schedule and resolve outstanding discovery matters. Okay. No order on the other things. We might see a couple more filings on this grand jury disclosure thing. They might, SPLC might reply. And when they do, I'll cover it. So if you want to follow this case with me, make sure you listen to my podcast or follow the playlist on my YouTube and Rumble page. Which, those of you that are podcast listeners, I know that sometimes it's kind of confusing because I'm uploading clips from the podcast as individual videos on my YouTube and Rumble. But the fact is that there's some people who they like the podcast version and they like this big, couple hours long, going over all these documents and materials. They like this one big update on a number of topics. And I thank you for that. That's great. But there's also a lot of people who they just want a shorter video. And so it makes sense for me to do both. So, I've always done clips of the podcast anyway. The difference now is that sometimes the clips are coming out before the podcast does. And I'm going to continue doing that, but to help everyone out with like figuring out what all's in the podcast on each of the podcasts. Let me go back to my screen. On each of the podcast episodes, I'm putting in this right here, these timestamps, to show, what segments are in the podcast episode and where they're at, so that if you have already listened to a segment or watched my video on a particular topic, you can just skip that to the next topic you haven't listened to. So, but it does make for, if you're someone who if you try and listen to everything I do, which I really appreciate, podcast and the individual videos, I really appreciate that. It's awesome. I would love it if everybody did that. If everybody watched everything I put out and liked everything I put out and subscribed to all of my platforms that I'm on, that would help me out a lot. But I don't expect you to do that. So I appreciate whatever it is, however you guys like to enjoy the Just Human experience. I appreciate it. So, all right. Thanks again. It's been a great week. It really has. It's been such a good week when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to the US Supreme Court, the Virginia Supreme Court. We've had a huge week of wins. Feels good. Enjoy it. Relish that, you know? Not all weeks are like this, but a lot of weeks under Trump are. So, all right. God bless each and every one of you. Have a wonderful Mother's Day, all you mothers. And yeah, enjoy the weekend. I'll see you next week with more videos covering more developments in all the cases that we're interested in and news items. And yeah, enjoy the wins that we're having right now. Have some gratitude for them and for the people that make them possible. Stay human and be righteous to one another. I'll see you on the next one.